Hey everybody, I'm back with another painting demo, and this is a still frame from the movie Joker. What I'm doing today is just studying from reference, and this is a really good way to learn about color or composition, whatever you're after. In this case, I really wanted to focus on color. You'll notice when the piece is done, it's not a one-to-one representation of the still frame, or it's not, the likeness isn't exactly perfect. But my whole goal in this painting session was to figure out, the colors and stuff that are in the actual frame. So the entire time here, I'm not color picking from my reference image. I have the reference image on my other monitor right now, and I'm just looking at it and trying to eyeball the color. A lot of times I'll put down a color and you'll see me, adjust it, change it a little bit until I start painting. So why do you do this? The main thing is you want to train your eye to see the actual color that you're looking at. Color is a thing that's very relative. So it's impacted by the colors that are around it. So one color by itself doesn't look the same as when it's sitting next to a different color. For example, with this piece, I started with this cyan background because the majority of the piece is this cyan color. I've seen a lot of artists do paintings where they start with like a wild color underneath, and I've never been able to do that. And I don't think it's a great thing for me because I like to be able to see how my color relationships are working. So I started with this cyan color. And then from there, I tend to just try to think about, is the color that I'm trying to find warmer or colder than the majority of my scene? So first coat, I kind of started with a red, and then the red, if you desaturate it, almost becomes a blue, but it can still be red, So, or vice versa. If you're in a mostly blue scene, a lot of his skin tones are all blue, but they look red and warm. But that's just because they're surrounded by this vivid blue color. So, when people are like, oh, what color do you use for skin tones? Well, completely relative. It's all just related to the lighting and seeing that everything's in. So I think this exercise is really powerful, and you can instantly bring it into your own artwork. If you wanted to make a scene like this from imagination, you could just start the same way. Start with this blue background and then base everything off of that. If you can figure out like the main tone that you want your shot to be, then it's a lot easier to start straight into color. So what I've done is, I'm in Photoshop this time. I'm usually in Procreate, but changing things up a little bit. And I'm just kind of using some really basic brushes. I don't have anything fancy. I've got a little bit of a chalky sort of brush. I think I got the brush set from Dave Greco, which has a couple of really nice chalk brushes in it, and it's totally worth picking up. He's also a phenomenal artist. So if you've ever haven't seen his work, you need to go stop this video and go look him up because he's awesome. But I'm also kind of playing with the colors a little bit. I've got in my brush settings, I adjusted the hue and saturation variance so that sometimes when I put down a stroke, the hue will shift a little bit. Like imagine on that wheel, the hue just kind of sliding left and right, like just a little notch. And that helps bring a little bit more life into an image. And you can do that in the brush settings. I also kind of, am strategically throwing in more saturated colors just for fun. So part of it is I'm picking the colors that I know are in the movie, but then I'm like, how can I like ramp it up a little bit too? So like the blues that I have on his face are more dramatic than the ones that are actually in the reference photo. I added some green on the side of his face as well. You'll notice with skin that depending where the blood sits and where the bones are in the head, like you get kind of different undertones in the skin. So like around the eyes, it can usually be a little bit more blue. Stuff that has a lot more, like a little bit more fat and a little bit more blood circulating through it will be more red. So, for example, the tip of the nose or the cheeks. Oftentimes, areas where there's bone will be a little bit more yellow or green, and that is like the chin, forehead. Um, with men as well, sometimes if you want to indicate that scruffy um, 5 o'clock shadow, you can just do like a wash of like a gray blue, and you'll instantly get that sort of beard feel without having to try to like put in a beard texture. I didn't draw this either. I just kind of went a little bit more painterly and kind of like decided on more shapes. Like I had like a very simple structure at the beginning, but then um, sometimes with these, you don't want to spend a ton of time. I wasn't really worried about like making it perfect, so I just kind of loosely blocked in some shapes and then just went for it instead of trying to get a really tight line drawing, because the whole point of this was the painting and the coloring of it. So it can be really tricky, especially if you're starting out, to go straight into color. So you could also do this as like a value-based approach. Turn your reference black and white, paint what you see in grayscale, and then you could come in with color and overlay layers on top and try to adjust the color that way. Or you could put a gradient map on top of your black and white layer, and then on top of that do some overlay and stuff like that. Maybe that's another thing that I should cover in the future, just because that can be really useful. I know when I was starting, going straight into color and then trying to worry about value as well is really overwhelming. But I think a direct color approach tends to be better. Black and white to color oftentimes feels really stiff and overly tight, I feel like. It also takes longer. But, in this case, like I wouldn't, if I was going black and white and then into color, I wouldn't have gotten the variation in tones throughout, like the skin and the t-shirt, or the white shirt. I've even got a little bit in his jacket. It kind of goes from like a purple to a red to a brown. So I personally prefer the direct color approach when I can. I think it always looks just a little bit more energetic. It's kind of that same idea where as you continually refine a sketch, things get more and more tight, but they also tend to lose a little bit of life in them. So, all right, so the blue that I'm adding right there, part of me is thinking about sky color, right? Because the sky is always a light, right? And this is very diffuse lighting. So most of your lighting is sky light. So it's going to be like a colder color. It's not necessarily going to be like a yellow sunlight. And I'm not like when I say blue, I'm not necessarily using blue. I'm picking that shirt color and then I'm moving the hue slider to a cooler color. And then if it's too cold, I'm going to desaturate the blue. And by desaturating that blue, it's going to make it feel warmer, which sounds crazy, right? It's like almost backwards. So you pick that color, and then if you desaturate a cold color, when it's surrounded by those cold colors, it's going to feel warmer. So it's something to play with. Don't necessarily go and pick blue. What I would do is try adjusting saturation first, because that can have it's more subtle, but will give you a more realistic color result as well. So if we talk about just kind of the technical aspect of this painting, it's really simple. I've got the character on one layer, and then I have a background layer currently, because I know I want to add some blurred out trees and stuff that are in the shot. So the easiest way to do that is make sure that your main subject stays on his own layer. And now I'm going to just go in the back with a cooler blue color and kind of scribble in some tree shapes. Very loose. I'm not, like I said, I'm not trying to make like a totally finished painting by any means, but I'm trying to get the values correct at this point. I'm going to add a little bit of a warmer color in there, and then really the key is just blurring it out. And let's see what we got. Oh, I had to flatten the background layer on there to blur it. It's kind of tree-like. Sure, I could have done a better job with that, but who cares, right? A little more tree in there. Sure. Just enough to indicate that there's something behind him, that he's in the world and he's not just on a flat background. I think overall I spent just about 2 hours on this. So I don't like to spend much longer than that on these sort of things. I probably overdid this one a little bit too. Because you're really just trying to learn. You're not trying to necessarily make a finished image. You just want to learn something new and then apply it. And the real key is repetition and, quantity of practice also, I think. Like focus on one idea and then it's all about just repeating that until you kind of hammer it into your brain. And then the more you do that, then the better chance you'll have of bringing that into your own work. And it almost becomes like muscle memory, right? So that's gonna do it. Oh wait, not quite. I had to adjust his face a little bit. Felt a little smushed. That's the problem with not having a solid line drawing when you start. All right, guys. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.